In October of 2021, Sasquatch Syndicate was privileged to be invited to the premiere of Hunting Bigfoot, a film by Taylor Guterson and Xenon Pictures. Xenon Pictures, of course, is famous for award-winning films such as Straight Outta Compton, for those familiar. The premiere was held at the Grand Cinema in Tacoma, Washington. The Grand Cinema is Puget Sound South nonprofit cinema, and it's a great facility if you ever get a chance to see a film there. Taylor and John, of course, were greeted by local fanfare and had a wonderful turnout. And with any premiere and private screening, the audience, of course, had mixed reviews, but ultimately they received a standing ovation and everyone really enjoyed it. What's really nice about the Grand Cinema is following the film, they bring up the lights and allow the audience to engage with the producers, directors, and stars of the film. Following the premiere, of course, Dawayne and I had a chance to meet with both Taylor and John, talk about Taylor's experience shooting the film and John's encounter, and the result of that conversation resulted in tonight's podcast. You're listening to Sasquatch Syndicate, Season 7, Episode 1, Hunting Bigfoot, a director's commentary with Taylor Guterson. We hope you enjoy the new format. Please don't forget to subscribe. It really helps our channel. Believe. You're listening to Sasquatch Syndicate.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
And all the ape believers don't want any of the paranormal believers to say anything because they're all whacked and screwed up and we don't want them. And all the paranormal believers don't want, go to the ape believers saying, well, you're all closed-minded. You're not open to the fact that it does this and it does that.
And I look over my left shoulder and this creature is running through the woods and it's bulldozing the brush down. And I knew, man, this thing is going to get me.
I'm so sorry about the ride, Mr. Guterson. I need to have Ray's work on the one's propulsion system, but it is the only way out. Guests must travel to our headquarters. My bodyguard Leo will be quickly here to help you. When you are finished, I will happily take you back to your home.
What you talking about, dear? You need to stop. I'm not her bodyguard, Mr. Guterson. The van is not the problem. It's her driving. I will have Reyes take you home when you're done.
Goodbye, Mr. Guterson. My executive assistant Leo will escort you and care for you properly. Do not hesitate to call upon me for assistance.
I don't even. She just says that stuff to piss me off.
There he is. Hey, Taylor. Good to see you.
All right, Mr. Guterson. I will let you guys be. By the way, Chuck, you may want to wash your hands. Dia brought him in the van. At some point, we need to talk about her driving.
Yeah, sorry about that, Taylor. Should have had Riz pick you up, but there's a sink over there if you want to wash up real quick.
All right.
All right, well, thanks again for making the trip. And I know with Dia's driving and flight navigation skills, you might have got a little bumpy coming in, but I don't know if she told you, but we're somewhere in the Central Valley area outside of Wenatchee.
Love Wenatchee.
All right, well, I guess we're all cleaned up, ready to go. Welcome to Sasquatch Syndicate, and maybe we can start at the beginning, Taylor, and talk a little bit about your background and how you got into film and directing.
Yeah, I in 2007 through 2008 worked at an internal studio at Washington Mutual Bank, if you remember that bank. And I was there during the financial crisis when the bank actually went under, and myself and everyone who worked there lost their job, and that was a big recession. And I really had the housing market crashed. I really had a year where I didn't really have a lot to do. I didn't have any kids at the time. I had a lot of freedom, and the job market was horrible for those who remember that time. It was a rough time, and so I spent 6 months making a movie because I had the time, and it was called Old Goats, which now can be seen on Amazon Prime, and it was actually on Netflix for a period. Anyhow, I made that movie because I had the time, and then it just sort of became an addiction making these movies. And now this is my fourth one, Hunting Bigfoot, and so that's sort of how it all started.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, when people have time on their hands, how creative they can actually be. And certainly it sounds like that happened to you.
You need time. You need time to make a movie, or you need to create time. But that was a perfect opportunity because, like I said, I was essentially unemployed. Since then, I've had a successful business with actually my former manager at WAMU, and I've become much more busy. And so it's been more difficult to make films, while you're working day job, and I have a family now. But I do feel like for anyone who wants to do anything, make film, be an artist, a hobby, that there's 24 hours in a day, and if you want to do something, there's always a way to do it. People will look for excuses not to do things or why they can't, and I don't believe in that at all. I think if you set your mind to something, you can really create whatever you want to create. It's a matter of doing it. It's not necessarily easy, but I think you have to have that kind of mentality.
So Taylor, maybe talk a little bit about your background. I mean, did you grow up here in the Washington area? And, I always find it fascinating, someone's going to make a film about Sasquatch or Bigfoot and kind of really what their background is, but maybe share where you grew up.
I grew up on Bainbridge Island. I was born in Seattle and I grew up on an island in Puget Sound. And since then, moved out further east. I was in East Gate, then I moved out to Sammamish, Issaquah area, and now I'm in North Bend. So I just keep pushing further. Pretty soon I'll be in Wenatchee.
Yeah, the Wenatchee, Leavenworth area is certainly a nice place to be. And, after the last 2 years being able to be remote, it made a lot of sense to get some more sunshine and open up another facility over in Central Washington. So if there was any issues or disaster recovery needs from the syndicate, we had a backup plan. And so it worked out really nice for us. But speaking of which, we have a lot of kids that help out with audio production and video production and editing. And, they come from all walks of life, high schoolers, college kids, and all those great things. And, Taylor, you're kind of an inspiration. You've self-taught, you have the drive to really dive into this, and you've created content and movies and film. And, maybe you don't think of yourself, from that perspective, but, for the kids out there listening, talk about the creation process and really kind of the drive you have. And, you're really kind of an inspiration to probably a lot of kids out there listening that really don't know how to get started, but maybe talk a little bit about that.
Glad to hear there's so many students that have passion to create and are interested. And, I will say, if you finish something, which I think within itself is such an accomplishment, just to finish something, that you'll find that there often are people out there in the world that become interested in what you've done. And that's what's happened to me to an extent. But I don't think you can go into it wanting that to be the goal has to be to accomplish, to finish it, and you really have to be in it for your own reasons, that it's something you love to do. If you're in it just because you think a certain outcome is going to happen, and if it doesn't, you might be disappointed. I don't think that's a recipe to create something good necessarily.
So Taylor, maybe we can talk a little bit about just your creative energies, your creative process, I think any of the creators out there listening certainly have a routine or something that really gets them going or gets them in kind of that mood and on the right side of your brain, to get in that creative space. I certainly love the movie Real Genius with Val Kilmer and some other flicks and certain tracks and music and, to kind of get me in that space. But what are some of your habits and what are some of the things that you do to kind of get prepared for creating a film or directing?
While I'm shooting and editing, like Hunting Bigfoot, I watch really as much as I can the type of film or documentary that may be close in certain sense to what I'm doing, because it can give you ideas on everything from how you shoot it to how you edit it to how music may flow in and out. I think it's important not just to try and become a copycat, though, but it is good to be inspired. One of the films I watched over and over while I made Hunting Bigfoot was this film, Grizzly Man. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a Werner Herzog film about Timothy Treadwell, who lived with grizzly bears up in Alaska and ultimately was eaten alive. So yeah, but outside of that, I watch everything as much as I can. But I do like to watch those that I feel can give me ideas for what I'm doing.
All right. Well, sorry for the interruption here. Looks like we've got Mr. Squidhead joining us, and let me make a call here. I gotta get this thing out of here. Hey, Paul, one of your Squidheads got over here in the studio. Can you come and get it, please?
Oh, there you are. All right, let me get him out of here. Sorry for the interruption. You guys have a great podcast.
Taylor, maybe you can talk us through the film itself, Hunting Bigfoot. Maybe give us the director's overview and narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. So, producer Tom Garai years ago helped me market my film Old Goats, and he then lived in Seattle and worked with a company called Shadowcatcher Entertainment that was run by David Skinner, local producer. Their sort of biggest film was one, Smoke Signals by Sherman Alexie, big Sundance film, late 90s. Anyhow, they helped me market Old Goats. In fact, Old Goats is their film now. And Tom really responded well about the Hunting Bigfoot, and he's down in LA now, and he knows Lee Savage at Xenon. And Lee wrote Straight Outta Compton and was nominated for an Academy Award and runs Xenon when they own many films. And I mean, it really was just a matter of Lee at Xenon watching the screener and responding really, really well to it, and wanting to represent it. Now, after we watched the first version, we actually worked for another year with Lee and Tom on some revisions to get the film into a place he felt could be a little more marketable. And typically, I don't like that type of feedback from folks, but Lee was the guy was nominated for an Academy Award. He knows what he's doing. He'd give me a point of feedback or suggestion. It would really resonate.
Right.
So anyhow, the film itself centers around a character by the name of John Green. And John, 10 years ago, claims a sighting and has since been consumed, obsessed with this sighting and with sort of proving to the world what he saw. He spends most of his time in the North Bend, area, and has developed relationships with others who are searching for Bigfoot as well. And he sort of flows in and out between sort of working and partnering with others and doing it on his own. And the film is really a story of his journey. It takes place over the course of 3 years, and we do look at his background as well, throughout his life. And sort of towards the end of the film, I think he finds maybe some compelling evidence, and it's sort of we unfortunately had a hard time continuing the film because when COVID hit in March of 2020, it kind of put a stop on everything, and so that's when the film ends. I've actually sort of thought about picking it back up again because John's still out there.
So Taylor, the character John Green, was that just a coincidence? I mean, that name certainly has a lot of meaning in the Sasquatch and Bigfoot community, and certainly one of the original Four Horsemen.
That is total coincidence. Going into this film, I didn't know a whole lot about, the culture that surrounds Bigfoot in this, country, or even globally. I was really interested in these people in my community, and early on in our filming, a number of people mentioned this other John Green, and then of course you did too. And I looked it up on Wikipedia. I'm like, what are the odds of this? But I mean, it's just a coincidence. That's John. His real name is John Green.
So Taylor, first I just wanted to say thanks for not making another Sasquatch horror film. And, this is really a deep psychological state of a character that believes he had a sighting. He had been through a lot of emotional trauma, both professionally and within his inner circle and family. And, oftentimes, people get lost and they need to connect to something bigger than them to pull them out of a certain situation. But, from the psychological state of John and what you observed as the director, like, what did you feel kind of going in? And, really, what did you observe?
Yeah. So this is the way I look at that. At the time John reported his sighting, it was during a time that he was really struggling in life. His business was failing. His family had many problems. He was at a low in his life at the exact same time that he had the sighting. So is that just coincidence? It doesn't seem like it would be, right? Now, we just talked about the coincidence of John Green, the name. And so coincidences do also happen. So there's no question that this sighting takes place at a time when you think it may occur for someone in this state. On the flip side of that, John, when he tells the story of the sighting, and in fact, in the film, it's only a fraction of the story he told me. I have hours of footage on this, but you obviously can't include it all. The way he describes this is so detailed and nuanced, and he actually refers to it as a primate. He didn't actually call it a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. And in his detailed description, it doesn't even actually sound like what we may think of as a Bigfoot. It's a little more scrawny. It's only about 6'1". It's not this huge sort of beast. And so I've never heard, I've talked to a lot of people that have had sightings and reported different things. I've never heard anything like this. And the way he describes it is as if it was really, really happened to him. It's not proof that it did happen to him, of course. So it does make you think. It makes me think. On one hand, it doesn't seem coincidental that he has this sighting and takes this new path in life right at the time his life is sort of falling apart. On the other side of that, strange things happen in life. Coincidences do happen. And if you really did see something, it could have just been, the timing could have just been coincidental. So that's kind of how I think about, when and how and why he saw what, or claims to see what he saw.
Yeah, and I guess, having listened to encounters and stories and folks at conferences, and, oftentimes you run across somebody that, may not want to tell their story. They seem very reserved. And during the question and answer session, someone had asked John about his encounter, and he was pretty reserved about it. And that really gives me pause and credence that something really happened to him. And so, on the flip side, I guess, you look at it and you say, well, this guy's also down on his luck, and he really needed to connect to something and really believe in something to give him hope. And sometimes Bigfoot can be that belief. And I'm not saying John didn't have his encounter. I believe he did. But oftentimes you see people that are struggling really need to cling or belong to something. And it may be as simple as the belief in Sasquatch or Bigfoot. So I just always find it fascinating.
Yeah, in fact, a number of people that I tried to interview in this film, I mean, you've seen the film, so there's a montage sequence where we sort of fly through a number of stories, sound bites that people in this area have had, if you recall that moment. That's only a fraction of the people I tried to get to participate. I would say more people than not don't want to share their story because I think they may feel that, I don't know, that people may view them a certain way or they may be dismissed. And I actually find those stories the most compelling because clearly someone has a story, clearly something happened to them, and they're not trying to seek any benefit off of it. In fact, they don't even, like I said, want to share it in some cases. And so what exactly would be the motive in that case for just making it up and then trying to keep it hidden indefinitely?
So Taylor, maybe talk about John Green, the man. And, certainly he went through a lot of trouble and turmoil over this encounter. And, you find that oftentimes, talking to people that have come forward and, they wanted to avoid fear of reprisal, but, they got the stigma, right, where they were abandoned by their friends and family and lost their profession. And, John had an interesting journey. Not only did he experience all of those things, but he actually got back up on his feet, rebuilt his relationships, lost some relationships even through death. And, talk a little bit about just the experience with John Green, the man, and really what you observed.
Yeah. So John, I think at his core is a solo man throughout his life. He is dedicated and, obsessed with whatever he's doing at the time, whether it's his business. He had multiple businesses, in fact, was very successful, or now searching for Bigfoot. And I'd say relationships kind of come in and out of his life and present in different forms. I mean, certainly the most meaningful was that of his family. His wife passed away, and that hurt him a great deal. But he was very forthcoming about, their problems that they had. In fact, John was married twice. He had a previous wife. I didn't get into that in the film because there's only so much backstory you can go into. But this was his second wife, and with his children, with his extended family, even with his father. He tells a story when his father passed away. He's always been, and he'd be the first to say this, distant with everybody. And I'm not sure exactly, why that is, but he's not a person that it makes him uncomfortable to be by himself. In terms of the people he has got to know here in the North Bend area, I've got to know him, obviously, and Ben Cochman, who owns the gym. He's become a friend of his. But even with us, the relationship sort of flows in and out. I mean, sometimes you can't even get a hold of John. You don't know, what he's doing, or he can get, irritated with you. I mean, we all can, I suppose. But I believe that, if you could look sort of deep into him, that he's a solo man, like Timothy Treadwell was and roaming out in Alaska with the grizzly bears. And there's something I kind of like about that, to tell you the truth.
All right. Again, the film is Hunting Bigfoot, directed by Taylor Guterson, starring John Green, and promoted by Xenon Pictures and Sasquatch Syndicate. This has been a production of Sherpa Networks. We really appreciate everybody listening this evening. Hopefully enjoying the new format. Please be sure to hit the comments and give us some feedback. Also, if you're not subscribed out on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon for all the latest notifications. And again, Taylor, thanks for coming on Sasquatch Syndicate. We really appreciated your film, all of your great words of inspiration, And we really appreciate you coming on the show this evening. I know our listeners do as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the time, the support, and I hope we talk again.
All right, Mr. Guterson, it's time to go. The van is waiting. You ready to go back to North Bend?
En mi mente lo pasamos bien la vida, pero realmente siempre me olvida. Quiero que seas muy contenta, quiero escapar la tormenta. Quítate la ropa bien mojadita, fuerte mar y se llama Indica. Yeah. Tú me das ansiedad cuando no me mires a los ojos. Recordando esa noche en mi carro y pensé que estaba yo muy claro. ¿Cómo te sientes? Yeah. Jugando con mi mente, ya corazón me fui. Necesito amar a mí. Acabó el baile con mi vida. Queda por la salida. Tú me das ansiedad cuando no me mires a los ojos. Cuando me tiras a los lobos, de mí a ti no hay nada, no tengo ni un pedacito de mi amor. De mí a ti no hay nada, no tengo ni un corazón roto que dar. Y tú me llenas de temor. Y así te vas sin dolor. Yo pone el canción bailando en mi mente. Quiero algo diferente. Quiero algo diferente.